Now, when you dive into the world of data warehousing, you are going to bump up against some terminology that may be new to you, and I want to hit some of the main terms you're going to hear and explain to you what they mean. Because when people use terms like LOB, which means line of business, they're telling you a lot, not just line of business, but they're also telling you about the kind of data. In this instance, when they say LOB, they're talking about, first of all, line of business, but what they're really talking about is that day-to-day specialized transaction-based data that comes into the database. This is the data that goes into the OLTP database. We'll talk more about the different database types throughout the course. And this is the granular, daily, detailed data that we're going to use to populate our data warehouse. So when you hear LOB, that's what they're talking about. When they say DW, they're just simply using an abbreviated term for data warehouse. You'll also hear them call it a warehouse, all kinds of things. But DW, data warehouse, pretty easy one. Now, lineage information, this is pretty interesting. When you start reaching out there and grabbing data from multiple sources and loading that data into your data warehouse, you may scrub or transform that data as it comes in. And a lot of times we want to make a little note somewhere in our data warehouse on exactly where that data came from, when we pulled it in, and any other information we want to know about why we put that data in. Now, another term for lineage information is metadata. It's data about data. And so you'll hear people talk about lineage or metadata. That's what they're talking about. Then you'll hear the word normalized, and we'll talk about normalized a little later on in the course. I'm going to show you a little video with an animation to help you understand it. Most people coming to this course probably know this, but for those of you who may be new and don't really understand the differences, I'll give you a little very, very quick, simple explanation and animation on normalization. But normalized simply refers to the database structure that's supporting your line of business functionality. It has to do with the number of tables and how they're related. And generally, in a normalized database, you have a single table contains very closely related data. Then there'll be another single table with very closely related data. Now, between these two tables, the data may relate, but we really limit each table's contents to very closely related data. And you'll read all about that when you read about first, third, fourth, and so on, normal forms. But when people talk about normalized, they're really describing the structure of a database. Now, data quality, this is another term you'll hear, and what they're talking about here is consistency in data formatting. Good example. State abbreviations. Some people use 2 letters. Some will use 3. Some will use the first 5 letters of the state's name. You'll see all these codes and spellings and stuff out there that are different when you've got data in different sources. When we bring it into the data warehouse, we want all the states, say Tennessee, we want them all to be TN. We don't want some to be TN, some TENN, whatever, however people are doing this. Okay, so when they're talking about data quality, they're talking about consistency and how the data is put in. It makes it much easier to access this data, pull queries, and so forth. Dimensional model, this is another term for a data warehouse. When you hear a dimensional, then that's data warehouse. When you hear dimension, they're probably talking about something connected to a data warehouse. Then there's star and snowflake. This refers to a specific data warehouse structure, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these, actually quite a bit more about these later on in the course. But just understand for now, when you hear star or snowflake, they're talking about data warehouses. Of course, depending on the context of where you are. If you're at your child's kindergarten function, they're probably not talking about data warehouses. Granularity. This is the level of detail that you can actually pull from the data warehouse. Now, obviously, you have to make some decisions when you're designing that data warehouse as to, okay, what level of detail do I want to pull data in from the sources and store in the data warehouse? Do we want to be able to ultimately report from the data warehouse just quarterly? We want to go down to weekly, daily, hourly. How much level of detail do we need? Because we need to architect that into the structure of our data warehouse. Discretizing or discretizing, however you want to say it. If you're from the United States, you're going to say it drastically different between North and the South. But notice this is coming from the root word discrete, and this is just where we group values down to a few discrete groups. We do this all the time in life. Think about high school or college. We have seniors, juniors, sophomore, freshman. These are all students, but rather than go by ages, we know generally what seniors are going to be generally age grouped, juniors and so forth. And so we can do this in data warehouses. We can take years and discretize them down into quarters, the week number of the year, all that kind of stuff. So this simply is breaking a large group up down into a few discrete groups, and there's all kind of possibilities with that, and a lot of times that becomes art as opposed to science. So anyway, this is just a quick example of some of the terms that you're going to start to hear when you work with data warehouses.